So we are back with the portion of intrusion or re-experiencing. Again, we're still talking about points of terror in chapter 1. So here we go. One of the most problematic manifestations of terror is that it keeps intruding into one's life as if the original trauma were reoccurring in the present. Van der Kolk reminds us that, quote, because of this timeless and unintegrated nature of traumatic memories, victims remain embedded in the trauma as contemporary experience, instead of being able to accept it as something belonging to the past, in his 1996 book. Whereas most of us will be only slightly annoyed by repetitive stimuli and just ignore them or tune them out, the traumatized person responds to each repetition as though it were a new and dangerous situation. Unresolved traumatic memories never reach the point of becoming part of the narrative of one's life. Instead, they remain unstable reactions which lead to intrude into one's personal relationships and internal experiences. Daniel Segal, author of the seminal work The Developing Mind, says, quote, repeated experiences of terror and fear can be ingrained within the circuits of the brain as states of mind with chronic occurrence. These states can become more readily activated, retrieved, in the future, such as they become characteristic traits of the individual. We simply enter these ingrained states and experience them as the reality of our present experience, unquote, from his 1999 work. The triggers don't have to be particularly significant. Herman, so that's Judith Herman, says seemingly insignificant reminders can also evoke these memories, which often return with all the vividness and emotional force of the original event, unquote. Okay. It doesn't even need to be events of their own lives which trigger traumatized children. Robert Pinos points out, quote, even fictional portrayals in fairy tales, in novels, or on TV may further challenge the child, according to his 1991 book. Many adoptees have told me that certain stories such as The Ugly Duckling, The Runaway Bunny, Peter Pan, Are You My Mother, and Pinocchio have had such dramatic effect on them. Okay, pausing there. Ironically, Peter Pan is one of my favorites. Pinocchio creeps me out. Was not a big fan of The Runaway Bunny. Are You My Mother is okay, and The Ugly Duckling bothers me for other reasons. But yeah, I will say that things like Annie bother me. God, I'm trying to think of what else. Oh my gosh. Snow White bothered me for other reasons. She wasn't a baby. Rapunzel, the original Rapunzel story bothers me. I do kind of enjoy the, the Tangled version. But the original story, like as seen in Into the Woods, is, bothersome to me. But yeah, I mean, for sure, there's definitely pieces that are bothersome. You know, what is it? The Secret Life of the American Secret Life, The Secret Life of America. I don't remember the whole show. There's a whole TV show about the, or there's like Switched at Birth is one. There's a whole bunch, and it's usually ABC. There's definitely horrid portrayals of adoption. I honestly don't know any that is accurate for sure. I will say one that I do enjoy for several reasons. That is not because of adopted, but the reconnection was August Rush. Now, I am slightly biased because, one, it was filmed in New York City, not that far from me, and I love the actors. In fact, my aunt was actually in it as the social worker. She's since passed now, but she's amazing. But I also love that this little boy, August, felt such a connection to his biological family. And he just knew that they were going to find him through his music because they had that connection. Somehow he knew, right? And it's just one of those things that, well, yes, that's not how that truly happens, right? That's extremely, intense. There's this piece where in reunion, adoptees often look for the familiarity with their biological parents. So, we've talked about nature versus nurture. There's something about nature, that genetic, biological portion of you that connects to your family. So, for example, with my family, I have some examples actually. Let's just start with big animal person. So, turns out both my biological parents grew up on farms. Both rode horses, so did I. Now, granted, my adoptive parents both rode horses, so there is a slight thing, but it was one of those connected things that I knew we had. Now, another thing that connected to my biological mother is my creativity. I am big on crafts and on baking and all this stuff. That is something she did. That is not something my adoptive parents did, right? Or my love for Victorian farmhouses. That is where she grew up. She grew up in a Victorian farmhouse. It's just one of those things that, I didn't even know that until much later when I was in reunion with her. What else? There's just, little things, okay, I'm going to be weird here. We both love this to ghost hunt. I know it sounds strange, but, we have this thing about walking through cemeteries. Again, something that I just did naturally, and curiosity, but then I find out much later when I'm in reunion with her. So it's just those little things that, even though it's weird, that's not something that normal people would just be like, oh yeah, everyone does that. You know what I'm saying? So it's just kind of it makes sense. It just makes sense, at least in my mind. Anyway, we're going to continue on. Because I just went on a rant. All right, anyway. These intrusions have different forms such as intense emotions like fear, panic, anger, or rage, somatic sensations such as stomach aches, headaches, or asthma, nightmares, interpersonal reenactments, and unhealthy behavioral patterns. The reactions to these intrusive flashbacks are often misunderstood by those close to the trauma victims. And many relationships are jeopardized by overwhelming and inappropriate responses to seemingly innocent stimuli. Because traumatic memories lack verbal narrative and context, they are the most often experienced as sensations and images and expressed as behavior. These acts often incur the frustration or wrath of the recipient and again cause difficulties in relationships. It is very difficult for an adoptee, for instance, to say exactly what they are experiencing, so they act out in response to the stimuli. An adoptee has two strikes against them. Not only are they traumatized, but the trauma occurred before they had words. It is important for a traumatized person to learn to halt the behavior reaction to the imagined danger until the neocortex can get in gear and modify the reaction. Sorry. Where am I? And modify the response. This can be learned, but it is not easy, especially since, as Van der Kolk reminds us, quote, over time, the triggers may become increasingly more subtle and generalized. It becomes difficult to recognize the stimuli as that which is causing the reaction. This, in combination with the adoptee's base perceptions about events in favor of the more negative aspects, makes interactions more and more confusing and difficult. Van der Kolk points out that trauma victims, quote, respond preferentially to trauma-related triggers at the expense of being able to attend to other perceptions, end quote. This can be noted in adoptees who latch on to anything that can be construed as a rejection, rather than seeing some word, action, or attitude in a more positive light. It also plays into their inability to distinguish between suggestion and control. The most innocuous suggestions are often interpreted by the adoptee as an attempt as an attempt to control. This can result in an adoptee's refusing to participate in any activity they might ordinarily enjoy just because it was suggested by someone else. So that could be true, especially with adoptive parents, because of the control aspect. You know, with our lives, we don't often have major control. And so if we lash out or we do some behavior, it's because it's the only thing that we feel we have control over, right? So again, even if it's a suggestion, it can come off as you're trying to control that person, even though you may have the best intentions. So we have to be aware, not just of wording, but how to help adoptees with this part. Anyway, I will see you guys next time. We're going to talk about repetition compulsion.